The views and content expressed on the Pop Culture Courtroom are provided solely for educational and entertainment purposes and do not constitute legal advice. For any legal matters, please consult with a licensed attorney.
Welcome back to the Pop Culture Courtroom. I'm Matt Hardin.
And I'm William Mayfield, and today we're going to talk about Happy Gilmore 2.
So there will be rampant spoilers throughout this podcast today, but however, if you have not seen this yet, that's frankly on you. I mean, it set a record for Netflix for the most downloads of the first 3 days of any movie they've ever had.
As is typical with Adam Sandler, the reviews were divided, but people still watched, and that's always been his big thing. I personally was pleasantly surprised. That's not to say that I thought the movie was great throughout, but it was definitely a fun trip down memory lane.
They did a really good job with the fan service throughout this movie. I mean, if you don't love the Sandman, again, that's on you. And that's, he's awesome in everything he does. And there's better movies and there's good movies, but maybe not the best. So this one, you can tell that the authors went way out of their way. The writers, Sandler and his longtime writing partner, Hurley, did a really good job with the callbacks to the old movie, which we're going to talk about some throughout this podcast. In this movie, within the first few minutes, we find out that Adam Sandler's no longer playing golf, largely because of a accidental death of his wife, Virginia Bennett, after they've had 4 boys and a young daughter. The young daughter is played by his actual daughter in real life. She's aspiring to get better at ballet, has been admitted to a prestigious ballet school in France. Happy's fallen on hard times working at a grocery store, has a pretty serious drinking problem. They do have John Daly living in their garage, which is pretty fun.
Not only was that his daughter, but the dance teacher for his daughter, who was supposedly at the Boys and Girls Club, is his wife in real life, when he eventually goes to some sort of 12-step program to get help with his drinking issue, and one of the girls there is his other daughter.
That's correct, though, kind of tatted up one. Matter of fact, I think they actually have a line at one point where she says, "You're like my dad."
Yeah, and they're
kind of a wink.
It's definitely a breaking the fourth wall situation where they're trying to be pretty overt about it. But I think that's great. It's tough when you have a sequel that's 29 years down the line. And some of the stuff that they did that I really liked about it, first, they weren't overly subtle with the callbacks. They would play clips from the previous movie. And I think when you're that far removed from your predecessor, that's pretty helpful for people. And then number 2, I think it was clear that, when Adam Sandler made this movie the first time, he was 29 years old, and now he's 58 years old, and they didn't hide from that. They steered right into it. It was a theme of, him being 58 years old and maybe it being difficult for him to compete at that age. But it was also fun to see that this movie meant a lot to him and he wanted his family as part of it. And that just added to the nostalgia.
To be fair, his family's in a lot of his movies. I mean, if you've seen Grown Ups or many, many other movies with him in it, he does like having his family in there. And I think it makes a lot of sense because you go off and make a movie for a few months. That means you're away from them. And if they're working with you, you're getting to be with them. And he's, by all accounts, a, very, very stand-up family man, which is great. So in this movie, the premise is that Adam Sandler, down on his luck, now needs to raise enough money to send his daughter, Vienna, off to ballet school in France. So he decides to play golf again after vowing, after his wife died, after an errant drive, to never play again.
What I liked a little bit more about this movie, I didn't like this movie more than the original. It would be hard to, I bet very few people did. But what I liked is that the golf was a touch more realistic until the end, and we'll get into that later. There's no way you could put up your golf clubs for 10 years and come back out and be instantly good. Of course, you're going to have some muscle memory remaining and have some skill left over, but golf is a sport that requires lots and lots of practice and repetition. And when he first goes back out to try golf again. He goes to a municipal course. He's trying to kind of hide his identity, and he plays with 3 Gen Z, almost kind of influencer type looking people, and he shoots, I believe, 117.
As somebody who learned to play golf in the last few years, that's on brand. I mean, if I don't play for a few weeks, you can tell William over here is a college golfer, is very plays at a very high level, and even he, if he goes, weeks or months without playing, it's, after you play and don't play in the winter, I think it takes you a little bit.
Absolutely, and then another realistic thing that happened is he actually got a little bit better as his round went along. It's something, I've often heard this with weightlifting as well. Once you set a ceiling, you can probably get back there, but you're not going to get back there immediately. It's going to take some time.
You're being very generous that he found some shots. If I remember right from that round, he had one good shot, and that was right before he goes into our first incident where he is riding with one of the people he's glommed on with for this. They're foursome. He falls asleep due to getting drunk during the round, and he is driving the cart. The guy's trying to have a conversation with him after he's hit the good shot, and he looks like he goes off at this municipal golf course, what appears to be a cliff over a sand trap, crashes into the golf cart with the other 2 people in it who dive off, engulfed in flames. Does it seem like they hit that at a pretty high pace of speed?
They did, and we have several indicators that this led to a significant injury. One, it gets on a Dan Patrick show. Dan Patrick's in a lot of Sandler movies, but he's a sportscaster, and they use that to kind of show the serious nature of this incident and the tough spot that Happy finds himself in. And then later on in the movie, we see them actually cheering for Happy, and they're all wearing neck braces. So
Shoot, one of them has traction on. So we're going to look at this and whether or not there would be a lawsuit with this incident. So drunk driving cases in general, we've done many drunk and drug driving cases here at our law firm. The general public hates those cases. I mean, if you're on a jury and a drunk driver has caused the injuries, the case is going to be worth considerably more than it would be with the same injuries without those factors involved. In fact, those cases tend to get resolved earlier in the process than the other ones. We live in a time of, if you live in a city of any size, there's going to be ride shares everywhere. And if you're making that decision just to be cheap, you're putting other people at so much risk. And that's just something we can't allow. I mean, they try to play it in a comic way here, in the world of Adam Sandler movies, a lot of other comedies, there's often not a lot of serious consequences. Well, in this movie has a lot of them, for all the people that have failed one way or another, whether it be Shooter McGavin using the heckler, where he basically is put in an insane asylum for nearly 30 years for that. I mean, he faced very serious consequences. And I think this goes along that theme. What ends up happening to Happy here?
So Happy gets cited for vandalism and DUI, but they agree to set those aside if Happy engages in absolutely no physical contact or basically, physical behavior, which we know is going to be tough for him given his hockey background. And he also has to get radical alcohol treatment, which sets up a pretty fun callback.
The Ben Stiller is the alcohol rehab guy who's related to the judge that sends him into the program. Yeah, they did a good job trying to figure out ways to use people from the past. They have another callback later when the tax collector that sells grandma's house comes back, and he's now a lawyer, and they're like, couldn't you done something that people liked you more?
Yeah. So both of those guys, it would have been really hard, almost unrealistic to kind of force them back into the film. But what's so great about Hal is, and that's Ben Stiller's character, Hal L., is they've put him in another position to abuse his power, where essentially he's using people that really need his help and instead having them do manual labor for his benefit.
It's still somewhat softer than the original. I mean, the original, he's having elderly people make quilts so he can sell them to people and do, hard chores at this place that they're supposed to be taken care of in their golden years. And this one's, at least he's trying to help them through the alcohol stuff, through the almost like a tough love program. So somehow it comes across a little better. What are your thoughts about the civil versus the criminal aspects of the golf cart crash?
So it's interesting, you were talking earlier about how DUI cases tend to merit higher judgments. in theory, the purpose of civil cases is to put the person who was wronged to have that right to make them whole. Whereas the purpose of criminal cases is to punish wrongdoers. However, civil cases where there are large public judgments uh, can also serve a good public policy interest because people will hear about that type of thing and be deterred from acting in that way. So even though the civil case really serves a different purpose, it can often have the same effect.
I think that's right, and people think of a DUI being, your people driving on public streets, but you can get a DUI in any type of motorized vehicle. You could be drunk driving with your riding lawnmower out on up this neighborhood road and get one. You can be in a boat. You can be in this golf cart. I've had a case before where a guy was riding a golf cart in a parking lot, would go and drop off his clubs and hit somebody. If you're driving a motorized vehicle or even riding one of those scooters that they have everywhere, it's thinking, have we gotten any calls like that?
We have, and the scooters sometimes seem and feel harmless. They're actually really fun. I've take them to lunch sometimes, or take them to downtown if there's like a basketball game or a hockey game. But
And he looks like a majestic swan as he cruises down the road.
I go just as fast as everybody else.
Yeah, almost.
But the thing about those scooters is not only I think sometimes people think, well, I'm really only risking injury to myself, but that's not true. You could hit someone on the sidewalk, you could cause a collision where the after effects cause them to hit somebody else. But, other than the obvious, which is that you shouldn't put yourself in that type of harm and danger, even on the scooters, you're doing harm to the public by getting on one of those intoxicated. So a general rule of thumb, if it is an object that is helping you move, don't do it while you're drunk.
Well, I think there's something about certain types of transportation that the people that are using them think that they don't have to bother to follow the traffic laws. Those scooters are 100% on that list. They love getting on the sidewalks. They're almost never wearing helmets, which if you've ever rented one, it gives you an option to go get one somewhere. And they're often drinking themselves, especially in the downtown corridor here in Nashville. And so we've had many, many, many calls about scooter crashes or where cars have hit them. And I believe almost every single time it's the scooter person's fault. Bicycles are like this too. They'll run right through stop signs and things like that. So, if you're on the road and you want to stay safe and avoid potential tickets and that type of thing, you need to try to obey all the traffic laws. So as far as this incident, Happy started off playing. He's drinking throughout his round, ends up being hammered, passes out, causes this wreck. These three people are injured. Two of them have dove away and somehow have hurt their neck doing that. I think that's probably just the writers thinking, what's the most common injury you're going to get from this? The other guy, I don't know how they didn't die. It's like a fireball of explosion. Which means this municipal golf course, meaning like the city probably owns it. They have gas powered golf carts, which is also unusual.
I love the gas powered carts. So you feel like you're doing something in those things. How convenient was it that Happy walked away from this unscathed, though?
To be fair, if he is essentially passed out at this, having your body be completely relaxed if you're capable of doing that in a wreck, you're probably not going to get as injured. The tensing up and there's not anything they can do to avoid this, but with the fireball and the intensity of this crash, I think at least one of them would have died and the other one would have been seriously injured. And if those folks had not jumped out of the way, they'd definitely be dead. The middle of that car, it rolls over it. It's a fireball.
One thing that came to mind for me is there's a golf course in North Georgia called Macklemore that I play that has this incredible cliff view off the side, and you can probably see a different state. That is one of the biggest drops, and you can see forever. And on this famous 18th cliff hole that they have, if you get too close to the side, the cart will automatically stop. It has like a governor that stops it. Now, I've always contended, I think it might let you go over the cliff backwards if you tried really hard, but I haven't tried it and I don't plan on it. But that's something that courses take into consideration generally. I've also played at different courses that said there's a really steep incline coming up to be on the lookout. So I think the golf course is gonna be involved with this because, like you said earlier, it seemed like that was a big cliff with absolutely no protections put in place.
Well, there's not even a sign or anything like that, and it may be a bit of forced perspective with the use of the camera, where they're making it feel like it's steeper than it is. However, but you got to have some kind of warning signs. All modern golf carts have regulators in them where, like you said, they shut down if you're going somewhere you're not supposed to, and that's typically going to be so you don't get up, drive on the greens because some people are not being as respectful to the courses as they need to be, and the course is making people do it. And so, as William was saying, if you get that, a lot of times it'll let you back out of the situation at a very slow rate to get back to where the forward part works again. Here, there's none of that. So, as far as there being a lawsuit, 100% there's a lawsuit against Happy here. Happy, as we know, does Happy have any assets at this point?
No, he actually has another lawsuit from where his car was getting repossessed earlier in the movie, and he took out his anger on a set repo man.
So the setup of that is he beat up the guy, but the degree of injury you would have to be what we can, I think, conjecture would have been a multi-millionaire golfer who's won 6 tour championships at this point. We know he won the U.S. Open because they say that. I mean, you win that's a few $1,000,000 for one. I mean, back then it would have been less, maybe $1,000,000, but you get periphery money from that. I mean, he had Subway, advertising for him or advertising with them very early on in his career. Winning a major and being at the level where, he says, Tiger and I are the best golfers of the 90s. I think that he would have a lot more money than that. This is a bit of a plot device because Virginia Bennett is very smart and I believe would have protected their money through trust and putting it in things like, if you put your money in retirement funds, that's judgment proof, meaning that if somebody gets a judgment against you, they cannot come in and take retirement money. If your money's in a trust, which is a type of what's called probate, like a wills and estate lawyer would set that up. You cannot get at that money, and you have a third party that runs the assets of the trust or the money or what's worth, whatever is of worth within it. I think this is outside what the universe of this movie wants to think about, but a golfer of that level being impoverished is quite a stretch. So there's one other thing I do want to talk about. So you had mentioned the municipality would have a potential liability related to the golf carts. Is there ever any type of limitations to what you can get from municipality?
I was gonna get to that. So these injured folks have some obstacles. One, at this point, we are led to believe that Happy really has nothing. He's moved to this area, the less expensive home, and he just shot 117, so the golf isn't looking real optimistic in terms of recovering. So if they included the golf course on the lawsuit, they're going to really hope that that is a golf course not owned by the government.
Why is that?
So a golf course not owned by the government likely has an insurance policy of $1 million or more. However, if it's a municipal golf course, which generally means owned by the government, there is going to be some sort of limitation. In Tennessee, we have what's called the Government Tort Liability Act.
Yeah, and it's around $300,000 for cases. It's winding its way through the legislature now, where it's expected over the next couple of years it'll be raised some. But I mean, to put that in perspective, that means if you say you're in a car wreck with a government worker and you have a smaller insurance policy, like a 50,000, 100,000 policy, and the government only has a 300,000, I mean, they could kill you and you still only have a $300,000 claim, which is pretty rough. You get somebody that's got children or family, they are not going to be fully compensated for that. But the government has, through the legislature, has set up these limitations to limit what they potentially would have to pay. And pretty much every other state in the country is going to have some type of limitation in that. So wherever you live, you get killed by someone that works for the government, you are, in an accidental way, you're going to have some real issues.
Yeah, and so if I were to hold water for the movie here in terms of the believability of him not having money, he was getting his car repossessed at the time, which means he was potentially well on his way to losing all of his money on his own. He does talk about how irresponsible he was.
I think he said he just wasn't making payments.
And that's true, but he probably wasn't making payments on a lot of stuff, and interest could be racking up. They were pretty young. A lot of people don't think about doing these estate planning documents, which is a mistake. But people at a young age, especially when you have children, the second you have children, you should really look into getting a will or a trust or whatever makes most sense for your family.
So from the graveyard scene, the awesome graveyard scene where he has the fight with Shooter later on, I believe it says Virginia died in 2014. So he would have been 47. And so even at that point, and as a golfer at their prime, typically when they're 47, Wayne.
No, there's some guys who have played really well into their late age. Phil Mickelson won a PGA championship at age 51. Tiger famously won the 2019 Masters. I believe he was 46 at that time. And especially as worked this way, as golfers have gotten more athletic and golf has turned into a sport more similar to your football, basketball, baseball in terms of the athleticism required. I would say 25 to 35 is really kind of the sweet spot.
What year did this movie take place in? Do you remember? The original?
The original movie was 1995.
Is it 95 or 96?
It's not 95 or 96. It's
When did Tiger Woods start playing?
Tiger Woods started playing professional golf around that time period.
So where I'm getting at with this is he was good immediately. And so in the first movie where Shooter and Happy are in the Tour Championship, it's likely that Tiger would have been playing with him.
It would have been close. Tiger won USA. He was winning US amateurs around that time, and then he won the 1997 Masters by 12 shots. And that was really, people knew about him, but that's when everybody learned about him. So it makes sense that maybe he wasn't towards the top of the leaderboard of the 96 Tour Championship, but I do agree he probably was there. I think he played every major in 1996.
I think it depends on how many they allowed in that because, it's now they have the 3 levels. So back then it would have been way more people.
They muddy the waters a little bit because the Tour Championship is an actual event that occurs at the end of the year in the PGA Tour schedule. However, it's not a major championship. You don't get a jacket. You get a lot of money. You actually get the most money for winning that of any golf tournament, but they're all walking around with gold jackets. So they're kind of trying to combine it with the Masters and the PGA Championship and the Tour Championship and kind of make it the most important event of the season.
Yep.
So in kind of wrapping up this incident, Happy Gilmore is driving a public golf cart at this point. We know that he's got issues in terms of how much money he has, but is it possible that one of his insurance policies could cover that?
It's possible, insurance, as we've talked about on the podcast before, is a contract, and whatever the contract says it's going to cover is what it's going to cover. So typically you're going to have to get separate golf cart insurance. Like if you ever go to Florida and you see people riding around on those golf carts on the main roads, those are almost always going to have a separate policy, but they're also more souped up. They're going to go faster. They have seat belts on them. Typically, I still think those are very unsafe to be on main roads. I mean, if you ever go down to 30A, like, many people here in our area in the South do, those things get on the roadway. They can't go as fast as cars. They have their children sitting on them without any type of seatbelt or safety equipment. They just seem dangerous. They clog up the traffic. Every time I see them, I just think they're dangerous and worry about those kids getting hit by getting rear-ended by a car or falling off that thing at 30 miles an hour behind with a car right behind them. So as far as this being a case or no case, what do you think?
It's certainly a case. It's clear to prove that Happy was negligent. He was so intoxicated that he fell asleep while he was driving a vehicle. He drove it off a cliff. I think that the golf course is going to be on the hook a little bit because this was a foreseeable outcome. Anytime you have a large cliff and people driving golf carts, people tend to drink a lot when they play golf. This is something that the golf course probably should have anticipated, and they took, at least to my knowledge, no steps whatsoever to prevent it.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the fact that Happy has no assets. He ends up winning the $400-something thousand at the Tour Championship. After melting down the last day, he was winning by 8 strokes going into it and played the best golf we've ever seen Happy play. And they've introduced a fun new variable where he has luck too, where it like bounces off other balls and things like that and goes in, or they had a bird poop on one of the balls that went in the hole, that type of thing, which was fun. I liked it. So statute of limitations we've talked about before. It's the limitation of time that you can bring the lawsuit. Statute of limitation in Tennessee is 1 year. In a lot of other states, it's 2 to 3 years, depending on what the circumstances, and it can be even longer if there's criminal convictions related to it. And so they have some time. We know from the timeline of the movie that the Tour Championship and the contest he plays in later, just within a couple of months of when this incident occurred, the people are still, wearing their neck braces and so forth. So they've got lots of time to bring the suit. So what happens if they get a judgment for all their injuries, their medical bills, their pain and suffering, their missing work, all that type of thing? They get that judgment and it ends up being 90% Happy's fault and 10% the golf course's fault. What happens then?
Well, at that point, presumably the golf course would have the 10% to satisfy their portion of the judgment. But in terms of Happy's, he probably wouldn't have it. And so that shed some light on a scene later in the movie where all three of those folks are pulling for Happy. And I can't imagine this is what the creators were thinking, but our show is about how the lawyers think about this. They actually have a great reason to be pulling for Happy, because the more he wins, the less judgment proof he is, and the more likely he is to be able to pay those judgments. But hypothetically, let's say the golf didn't work out. Happy has a lot of debts, and there are different types of debts. The debt you want, if you are the debtor, is a secured debt. That's the most powerful debt. It's first in line. Then there are priority unsecured claims, and there are general unsecured claims, and they come last in line. And unfortunately, for personal injury victims, those are largely where those fall, was in that general unsecured claim, along with like credit card debt and medical bills.
Well, the bankruptcy thing happens in our world too. You can actually go and list a personal injury lawsuit, a car wreck, in your bankruptcy if you're filing it. If you've already filed it, you can actually amend and add that. And then typically you end up going against insurance. So given Happy's assets that he's likely to get as he's returned to golf, like at the end of the movie, he's going to play in the British Open or the Open. And so is likely going to start making assets, also going because of that win in the Maxi contest is going to probably get commercials from that again. So if you go get a judgment against somebody in our state and other states, there's going to be another amount of time period that is collectible. So in Tennessee, you get 10 years to pursue a judgment. And then after that, you can renew it for 10-year periods, basically forever. So if I'm them, I get, Happy's happy. Got to have a lawyer defend him. Happy, no way he has insurance to cover this at the time this is going on at all. So he's likely to not have a lawyer. You're able to get probably what we call default judgment, meaning nobody's opposing the judgment. And then you take steps to collect that once he has assets, I think is what's going to probably happen here. And so I will say, trying to sue beloved golfers. So we talked about how the DUI is normally something that accelerates or makes the judgment higher. Beloved sports figure, gonna make it go the other way. These folks, the jury is going to likely make it less. Especially given his story of getting over this, he's going to be conciliatory about it. I'm sorry I did this. So I think at the end of the day, they can get a judgment for him, but it's probably going to be less than it would be against just some regular person who's not a beloved superstar golfer in person.
There's another factor to the DUI related claim as well. When bankruptcy occurs, lots of times personal injury judgments can be vacated at that point. But there are certain types of judgments that are deemed where you can't discharge them. And those include intentional acts, willful and malicious conduct, and DUI related claims. So it will be interesting to see the disposition of his DUI. It is certainly possible that a DUI could make it a non-dischargeable debt.
I think the other thing that would potentially not be dischargeable, or I know is not dischargeable, is punitive damages. So punitive damages are something designed to punish someone for egregious behavior. Being hammered and driving a golf cart is definitely something that could lead to a jury awarding punitive damages to prevent that behavior. So I think we're on the same page on this one. There definitely is a lawsuit that should be pursued related to this. It may take some time to get some funds for these 3 folks. And I mean, who knows? They may not want to pursue it because they like Happy so much.
And the good news from this is that looks like Happy's gonna need some money for a while, so, even if things don't work out on the, regular tour, maybe we see Happy on the Champions Tour.
Probably.
I think so. Another interesting wrinkle about this is that Happy hasn't played golf for 10 years. How did he qualify for the Tour Championship? Well, lots of the major championships, if you're a past champion, allow like the Masters, if you win the Masters, you can play in it forever until you get a little kind note from Augusta that says maybe it's time for you to hang it up. In which case you still can play, but it's against advice.
Yeah, and I think the Open lets you play for a long time too. It's just the PGA and the US Open that are I think you should get to play in it too. You wanna not play anymore, you're physically unable to play. I've never liked that those 2 kinda cut it off.
That's got to be the reason why Happy was able to play in this tournament was his exemption. He won it 6 times. They spread it out pretty evenly. He won the 96 one, and then he had a good run in kind of the early 2000s. This Tour Championship kind of felt like the Tiger 2019 Masters and the Phil 2021 PGA, where they had one last swan song, and that's what it felt like this was gonna be for Happy until the kid from The Sixth Sense came along and ruined it.
The Sixth Sense is such a good movie, and Haley Joel Osment is great, great, great in that movie. He's an odd casting choice for this particular role. I mean, I understand he's supposed to be a journeyman golfer, but he doesn't look like he could survive in a kickball league.
So we didn't have much conflict in our assessment of the case, but here's where we disagree. I think it was a great casting choice because at no point when I was watching The Sixth Sense did I think this guy's going to grow up and be a professional golfer. And I think what they're trying to get across here, Maxi Golf, which is the rival tour, is trying to come on the scene and make golf hip and cool and all this and go over the top. Well, they show Shooter McGavin the whole premise of Maxi Golf is based on the fact that they've figured out that if they break this ligament in someone's hip, that it can make you turn at a rate where you're going to hit the ball a very, very long way. So using someone who is perceivably unathletic and unlikely to win and turning him into this big winner is actually kind of reminiscent of what they're trying to do. And it also reminded me of young Henry Rowan Gardner, Chicago Cubs World Series champion from the rookie of the year.
Fair enough. I'll say this, because of his abilities to speak to the dead, I feel like that character would be able to use all the great golfers that ever happened. I mean, he can ring up Bobby Jones. I mean, he can go back and find Gene Saracen. I mean, all these people would be on his side to help him on his way to be something better than a journeyman golfer. He also can run very fast. You know, he was a little Forrest Gump earlier in his career. And so I feel like they showed some athleticism early on in his life. That was probably a little bit before the Sixth Sense. And so, you know, early in life, we're talking to dead people. We're running super fast. You know, Forrest is really impressed. He has really good hand-eye coordination. We know because little Forrest plays ping pong with Big Forrest. And it's like he's having to lunge at it. And, you know, Big Forrest is one of the best ping pong players ever, as we know. So I feel like they're not really showing his athleticism, but he showed a lot of signs early in life that he may have some really good skills and advantages that would help him in his journey toward being a professional athlete.
So do you think in this movie that golf is heading towards its steroid era? Do you think this is cheating?
I do. I think it's in the steroid type argument, and I love golf. I mean, I can honestly say I wish I'd played, you know, when I was younger. My kids are very good golfers, and it's because they have played since they were young with, frankly, a lot of influence from William here. It's a beautiful sport. It doesn't need to be a theme park. I really enjoyed this movie. You know, 75% of it I thought was really great, and the flaw to me is the Maxi contest, which is so ridiculous. I don't mind it being ridiculous. I mean, the first movie is ridiculous. It just kind of borders on some of this live PGA stuff, and no matter where you fall on that, it's just tasteful in general. I mean, we want all our best golfers to play together, whatever that might be. And the game of golf, I think more than many other sports, rely on honor of those that are playing it. You know, the so-called gentleman's game or gentlewomen's game now. I think that's part of the fabric of what makes golf of what it is, and that's we get away from that if people are willfully cheating to be able to hit a little farther. They ask Happy what's his was he missing this ligament? And he says, "Nope, I just fuel myself with rage." I did some background reading on this as we were getting ready for this podcast, and the actor who played Chubbs passed away, and Adam Sandler had come out during some of the interviews for this film, the press junkets, and said that they had an entirely different film that was written that involved Chubbs being way, way more involved. Carl Weathers passed away, and then they had to rewrite it. And so to me, this feels like they tried to shoehorn something in. Guy that plays his son is fine, but it's an odd casting choice. He doesn't seem much like his dad, and lots of us have wondered if that was the role that was offered to Tiger Woods that had to have happened, and he rejected it.
So I tend to agree with you that I think in sport, anything that you can do to work really hard, people try to change their bodies all the time, whether it's in the weight room or whether it's through running or whether it's through diet. But that's all really natural stuff that can actually help you in your life. Anytime you're having to do something to your body that's really harmful to be good at a sport, I think it takes away from it. This isn't about hard work. This is about getting a surgery, which I don't agree with. No, sometimes I think the type of shape that offensive linemen have to be in the NFL is maybe a little bit harmful to them because a lot of them you hear about them losing hundreds of pounds the second they get done with the league. So that's a debate for another day. But I do think that this is against the spirit of the game and cheating. Now talking about your Maxi situation, I think that's a take that a lot of people agree with, which is, it's okay to be a little bit silly, but at this point, this wasn't even golf anymore. This was a totally different sport that they were playing, and it bordered on unrealistic.
So one of the first podcasts we did was about Happy Gilmore, and as part of our relevant evidence there, we conjectured as to what the plot for Happy Gilmore 2 would be, and it's something that I think we even have talked about for years and years. I mean, even before they were planning to make this movie, we take some of these sports movies we really like and then think about what they would do if there was a sequel. So we thought we'd do today is kind of compare and contrast what they did versus what we wanted to do. So if you'll remember in the first one, what we had talked about doing was making the villain some kind of young upstart player that was going to be Bob Barker's grandson, Rob Parker.
We weren't totally off on this. Manatee, uh, who ran the Maxi Golf League, kind of served as that role. We did correctly hypothesize that Shooter and Happy would really join forces. So we got in the graveyard, we kind of got the end of that conflict. They kind of fought it out, and then they were on the same side for the rest of the movie, which I really like to see that. And then this Manatee guy ended up being the foil. In talking to a lot of people, he just didn't really resonate with people. I know you're not supposed to like the antagonist in a movie, but people loved how hateable Shooter was, and Shooter McGavin was one of the greatest, most liked enemies in the history of comedy. Much like the Joker in Dark Knight, you can love an antagonist. I don't think Manatee hit for people.
I agree with that. The guy that played Manatee in the movie is actually a very well thought of director. He directed Adam Sandler, one of his dramatic movies, Uncut Gems, with which people gave him, lauded him for how well he did in his dramatic role in that, and the movie's very well thought of. So my understanding is that director's now trying to be an actor, and I'm sure they have a long and deep relationship. As far as the character itself, it's an odd character. I mean, the vibe you get from them is just peculiar and just weird. Christian McDonald, who plays Shooter, I mean, every time he's on the screen, I thought, I wish he was more integral to this story. So the story we had come up with ours was that Happy had gotten an injury from playing hockey, so he was unable to play, and so Shooter had come in a record 7 times the second place in the tour championship, and we had them team up to give, Happy the purpose later in his career when it didn't seem like he'd be able to play golf again, and Happy had to hockey-type club to chip with.
So we got some of that right and got some of that wrong. What we did get correct was that for some reason or another, Happy had not played golf in a long time. And because that was a premise of that's the premise of Happy Gilmore, is that he's not really a golfer, but he's good at golf.
It's the fish out of the water.
Which doesn't exist, by the way. And anyone who's good at golf has put in a lot of time and effort to get there. Instead, they went back to the well on the financial, on needing money. We didn't have killing Virginia in the first 3 to 4 minutes on our bingo card.
I think that plot device actually set up the movie pretty well. The first 2/3 of this movie to me worked very, very well, and it was really the maxi golf competition that was a problem. And if they had made that a more traditional role instead of trying to modern up all those characters in the way they did, but we only had any interaction with one of them really up until when the contest was, was Sixth Sense himself, and the other ones were just introduced, and suddenly, I mean, we're supposed to care about what happened to him.
The only part of the maxi golf stuff that I liked, the maxi golf stuff was it just wasn't golf. So we've got probably the 4 most iconic golfers of this era, at least in terms of who's going to be remembered long term, and Bryson DeChambeau, Brooks Koepka, Rory McIlroy, and Scottie Scheffler. And they're in this big golf competition, and we don't get to watch them play any golf. That really bothered me. I'm okay with it being different. I'm okay if they'd hit like long golf shots that had obstacles or things like that. But they're driving like RC cars from a video game and hitting balls one-handed and in a bunker that's on fire, and is more than unrealistic. It wasn't possible. But the only part of the maxi that I did like is that I thought that the green on the final hole that was like rotating, and it felt a lot like the tower from movie 1, where there's this impossible putt with impossible obstacles in the way, but Happy, not being much of a golfer, not knowing quite how difficult this shot is going to be, just says, okay, I'll make it.
It's somehow the heckler crashing into the TV tower, knocking it over, them playing through anyways, not moving the stuff for Happy. I think they were trying to do the callback to, Chubbs teaching them how to play at the mini golf courses. And I think what they're trying to do here is make a more extreme, deliberate version of that. And I understand it. It's just, it could have been so much better. I mean, I would argue, I probably would have put John Rahm in there instead of Koepka, but I think your argument is right. At this point of their careers, Koepka's certainly done much more. I've watched a bunch of this YouTube golf with John Rahm in it, and he's frankly really funny.
I like Rahm better than Koepka. I just think that if we were to freeze time today, these would probably be the 4 going forward. And Koepka has 5 majors; those aren't going away. So let's say Rahm winning majors is really, really hard, and let's say Rahm doesn't win majors going forward, they kind of made the safe play with Koepka.
And he won 2.
Rahm's won 2, but Koepka's won 5.
That's the same as Bryson DeChambeau.
Yeah, well, Bryson DeChambeau probably gets the most impressions of any golfer in the world right now.
But your argument was that they'd be remembered more, and John Rahm's won the Masters, and I think that I'd take a Masters win over 2 U.S. Opens.
Well, he's won 3 PGAs as well.
I know we're talking about Bryson.
Oh, Bryson has transcended normal popularity with his YouTube. He's probably the most famous YouTube golfer, in addition to being a 2-time major winner.
Oh, I like Bryson. I mean, I've watched a ton of them. Including the Happy Gilmore one, which seems like it was edited more than this movie was to make the amateur golfer look better than he was.
And fun fact,
which I find a little frustrating.
At the time this movie was made, Scottie Scheffler only had 2. He now has 4. So that's played out well for them. They got kind of lucky on that one. That's all I'm saying. And since this movie is shot, Rory McIlroy has also completed the career Grand Slam, so that helps as well. I would have liked to seen a clown, because the "you're gonna die" clown scene with Chubbs, and it kept spitting the ball back at him. I would have been cool to see him conquer the clown.
Well, let's circle back to our plot and try to wrap it up a little bit. So I think the end of our plot was that Happy helped Shooter McGavin finally win a gold jacket as an older man in his 60s, which would have been, I think, pretty fun and would have had real golf playing, and you still could have had all these other golfers that are actually on the tours to come play with them, and would have been more similar. But I understand what they're trying to do with the callbacks with this last scene, and I think the way you connect it up makes a lot of sense, that they're trying to have it call back to the last scene of that. So ultimately is a little different than ours. Our fan fiction we drafted out for this. At the end of the day, I thought they did a good job with the homage to the old one. We have our things we can gripe about. I still watched it twice already, and I've enjoyed it. Especially the first 2/3 of it. I think are really, really good.
As is the case with Adam Sandler, he wants us to enjoy it. He wants to have fun, but at the end of the day, he knows it's probably not going to do great on Rotten Tomatoes, and that's never been what he cared about too much. He wanted it to be a good time and something that we could laugh at and have fun with, and he accomplished that.
Well, and I've seen him in stand-up a couple of times. He's great at that too. And in the last one I saw him when he came to Nashville and played at Bridgestone, he talked about, his relationship with the hatred he has for all these Rotten Tomato peoples. But, like when he got fired from Saturday Night Live, he had the last laugh. He's I think, likely the most successful comic actor ever and universally beloved. So all in all, it's another win for Adam Sandler, another win for us. And anything else you want to talk about before we wrap it up?
And now we're going to read you our 2.5-hour screenplay for Happy Gilmore 3. Just kidding. In fact, that is all we're going to give you. We appreciate you listening.
I will say that's not too much of a spoiler for what's coming at Happy Gilmore 3, but let's just say Shooter's going to get that gold jacket. Thank you all for coming by and listening to us at the Pop Culture Courtroom. I'm Matt Hardin.
I'm William Mayfield.
We'll see you next time.
The Pop Culture Courtroom is a Matt Hardin Law production.
If you're a loved one that's been injured in a car wreck or other personal injury incident, call the law firm, the Tennesseans Trust.
Visit matthardinlaw.com or call 615-200-1111 for your free consultation today.